Hello, you're listening to Just Films and That. This is the podcast where we talk about films we think are underrated, underseen, or perhaps we just wanted to talk about them. I'm Josh Hallam, and this week we're talking about A Cinderella Story. So, let's see what we think. So, Alice.
Yes.
A Cinderella Story from 2004.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about and why did you pick it?
Right, so A Cinderella Story it's essentially the fairy tale of Cinderella, but what if Cinderella was Lizzie McGuire in LA in the 2000s? So Sam, who's played by Hilary Duff, loses her mum quite young and then her dad dies in an earthquake and she's left to live with her evil stepmum and her annoying stepsisters. She meets a boy, Austin Ames, played by Chad Michael Murray, in an online chat room. They agree to meet, but they do so at a high school Halloween party where Sam is able to keep her identity a secret with her Cinderella costume. Just before midnight, she has to leave to go back to work at her stepmom's diner, and then the hunt begins to discover who is the mystery Cinderella. So why did I pick it?
Why did you pick it?
I thought it was one of them. I think this happens a lot. Like, it just pops into your head and you think, oh, well, I'll have a little look at the ratings, see what people are saying about it. And one of the ratings in particular was really, really low. So I was like, oh, nah, there's no way it's that bad, sort of thing. So I went into this thinking that, I reckon this could be underrated, but also it's kind of a bit of a revisit as well. So I haven't seen this for many, many years, but I did watch it quite a lot, like when I was a teenager. And I remember kind of knowing that it wasn't amazing, but still enjoying it at the same time and still sort of getting quite a lot out of it. Little bit like Just My Luck. You know, when you kind of, you know that something's not amazing, but you still have quite a lot of affection for it. So I just wanted to see, like, is it actually any good? Like, is there stuff in there? Is there nuance? Is there depth of character? All this bullshit. Turns out no, but we'll get to that. So that is why I picked it. Josh, had you seen this one?
So, not to let people behind the curtain, but we're recording this straight after another episode, which is the episode on Rocky Balboa. And I had a free Saturday night because I'm really sad when my other half was out and I was trying to be good and not do anything like go to the pub or go out or anything like that, right? So I was going to watch Rocky, and then I thought, well, I'll try and squeeze in another film so that I don't, that I've got to, we can do a double record and we've got one in the bank, etc., etc. That's how it works. Sorry if that ruins the illusion. But so I text you saying, I'm going to watch another film. Do you want to give me your next choice? And then I'll watch it. And you text back, A Cinderella Story, and I thought, oh, fuck you, Alice. So there I was, an almost 32-year-old man on a Saturday night on my own, sipping tea, watching A Cinderella Story.
That's pretty funny. That's a funny image. You're going to be on some list somewhere.
But I put it into Prime and I went to buy it and it went, really? And I went, compared to all the other stuff.
Are you sure?
Yeah, are you sure you want to buy this? But no, I hadn't seen it before. I remember I remember this coming out, and I remember that lots and lots of girls, and probably some guys as well, had a massive crush on Chad Michael Murray when we were in school.
Right.
He's like,
I was obsessed with this fella. Obsessed with him because he was in One Tree Hill,
which
I was a big fan of, and I did. And I fancied the absolute pants off him. Yeah.
So no, I hadn't seen it before. All I really knew about it was, I assumed it was something to do with like a Cinderella adaptation. I knew Hilary Duff was in it. I knew Chad Michael Murray was in it. That's all I really knew about it. But I did go into this expecting sort of like, oh, what's this going to be like? But to be honest, we always try and be balanced, don't we? And I don't want to, we've touched on this before. There is an element of this sort of film of sort of of going into it as if it doesn't have a right to be a film, or it doesn't have a right or whatever. And I think that's bollocks. I think everything has a right. There's an audience for everything. So
totally.
With that in mind, let's get stuck into what we liked about it. Now, you picked it, so after you, what did you like about A Cinderella Story?
So I will preface this with saying, obviously, there is quite a strong element of nostalgia here for me that is doing some of the heavy lifting. But there are some things that I thought were pretty good about this film. So the best thing, obviously, is Jennifer Coolidge, who plays the evil stepmom, right?
Stifler's mum.
a lot of the jokes in this are either outdated or fall flat or both, but she is absolutely hilarious and has the best comedy lines in this. She is the comedy character. She calls Norway Norwegia. She says that droughts are for poor people. And at one point she says to Sam, right? So Sam, her stepdaughter, who has lost both her parents, she says, "There's something I've always wanted to tell you, and I think you're ready to hear it. You're not very pretty and you're not very bright." Oh, I'm so glad we had this talk. And she just had so many brilliant one-liners. You know, she's brutal. Like, her takedowns of the other characters are brilliant. And she's just got such a way about her, hasn't she, Jennifer Coolidge? She's just so fucking funny.
She's
in
a fantastic
she's in.
comedy actor.
She's so good.
Most people, if you haven't seen the film, will know her as Stifler's mom.
Yeah.
But she's been, she is more than that. She's great in this. She's great.
All over
She's
the
great
place
in
now,
American
she
Pie.
pops up.
There was a series that's just been quite a bit of a critics' darling, quite an award season darling, called The White Lotus.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, so we watched it, and I got about halfway through, and it wasn't for me. I turned it off. But she was the best thing in it. And she is quite a comic relief character in that, but she plays that sort of away with the fairies type character so well. Or in this, she plays the sort of the villain, but at the same time, she is a villain, but she's also a comic foil as well, and she's really, really good in it. So yeah, she's fantastic in this. Yeah,
she's so funny. Her one-liners were brilliant and actually had me laughing out loud as well. So she was a real highlight, and I'd probably say the best thing about this film. So obviously got to talk about the soundtrack. So any noughties teen girl's dream is featuring, the Goo Goo Dolls and Jimmy Eat World.
Edward McCain.
Oh, mate, I've got a little story about that. That is going to be a little bit, it's going to be like a bit of a diet rabbit hole that I'll go into in a little bit, but I'll tell you all about it, right? But anyway, so when I was like 15 to 19, I was fully obsessed with the Goo Goo Dolls, right? But I haven't listened to them since. And then after the prologue of this film, it basically opens with their song Sympathy, right? And I had such a profound emotional response to that and to hearing that song because I hadn't heard it in so long.
Tell me about it. Tell me about your Goo Goo Dolls reaction.
Oh my God. Like I can't tell you, Josh, like, I don't know if you ever had this, and I know a lot of people did, but when you discover bands at a certain age and it's like they just become your whole life and you become utterly obsessed and it's all you listen to. Like I had a few of their like live in concert DVDs that I just watched on repeat nonstop. And then I don't know, something happened. I think I left college and I left, I suppose, the group of friends that we all listened to the Goo Goo Dolls, and it just stopped.
You had a group of friends, and the whole thing of the group of friends was a shared love of the band, the Goo Goo Dolls.
Not just that, but we had a lot of musical interest in common, and we were obsessed with the same bands.
I also really loved the Goo Goo Dolls.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yay!
Everyone knows Iris, but also, like you say, Sideways, Black Balloon, Broadway, Dizzy Up Girl, all great. There's some bangers in there, and
the list goes on.
Yeah. If you like soft rock by sort of baby-faced looking well-groomed men, this is a film for you.
And John Rzeznik as well, I just absolutely fancied the pants off him. Like I've seen them twice in concert. One time I went on my own because no one else wanted to go. I was literally like 15 or 16, and I went to the Apollo in Manchester on my own to see the Goo Goo Dolls. So I come out in like the middle of Manchester, like at 11:30 at night. It was fucking terrifying. I can't believe my parents let me go. But yeah, that was a bit sad. So I think that's the only gig I've been to on my own. But I had to go.
Little Alice going to see the Goo Goo Dolls.
Loved it. I couldn't not go. Oh, it was amazing. But I did have a great time. So once, because the film started that way and I had that sort of emotional reaction, that's quite a good way for a film to start for me, obviously, or for anyone, because it's like, oh, I feel emotionally invested now. So I was kind of riding that nostalgia wave from the off. So the soundtrack in general, so it did lead me down a bit of this rabbit hole, right? So I'm just going to go into this a little bit. So
go on.
The song that you mentioned there, what was it by
Edwin McCain, Albie.
Yeah,
your
right.
crown shoulder. That one.
I was utterly convinced until a couple of nights ago when I watched this film that song was by the Goo Goo Dolls, right? I had this memory. So But I think when we were watching it on, I was watching it on Prime, and when you pause on Prime, it tells you who the actors are in that scene, but it also tells you any songs that are playing, which I think is really cool, right? And it said this guy's name, and I was like, who's this guy? I don't know this guy who sings this song. So I was like, oh, I guess Goo Goo Dolls must have done a cover of it. So then I started Googling. It's like, oh, Goo Goo Dolls, I'll Be, and like Goo Goo Dolls cover and all this. And I couldn't find it anywhere. And this article popped up that was like, this is why people think the Goo Goo Dolls covered I'll Be, but they never did, and all this. And they were just like, listen, there is no record of the Goo Goo Dolls ever having covered I'll Be. We don't know why this has happened, that people have got this false memory and all this. And I was like, oh my God, what? Like, how? Because I was convinced that, like, I'd seen them play it live and stuff. And I was just like, oh my God, they never did. So then I'm looking. But turns out they never did cover the song. So I'd literally gone my whole life up until this point thinking that they had done that song, thinking that, oh yeah, it was a bit weird that they chose 2 Goo Goo Dolls songs to be in A Cinderella Story and then no more. Because at first you think, because they're like the first 2 songs that get played. So you think, oh, maybe it's just going to be loads of Goo Goo Dolls and they're the main soundtrack. But it's not. It was just those 2. Mate, I was just so confused. But apparently it's like a thing. It's like this shared false memory.
I can tell you why. So that's an example of the Mandela effect, right? You know the Mandela effect, right? So the reason why, and I'll tell you why, because it's not the only occasion this has happened. So the reason why lots of people think that the Goo Goo Dolls covered I'll Be is because of fucking Limewire. Did you ever use Limewire when you were a kid?
Of course I did, Josh. Right. Of course I did.
Oh
my God, you've got the answer.
So when people would download music illegally,
totally illegal.
I never did. You know,
I did it.
I've always paid for everything, but essentially it was peer-to-peer sharing, and people would download songs, and it would just be whatever the person uploaded it as. So I also thought that the Goo Goo Dolls sang I'll Be, but they didn't.
God.
So another example is there is a lot of songs that were incorrectly named because they might have been written by someone who didn't speak English as a first language or someone who didn't care, so they just had a guess. So, for example, for a long time, I thought that the song Don't Stop Believing by Journey was called Midnight Train. And because obviously it says Midnight Train going anywhere, so it was called Midnight Train. So Goo Goo Dolls is so that is why is that Goo Goo Dolls was always on there as I'll Be,
and it would have been because
it also does sound a lot like him, so that's why.
This was what the person who wrote the article sort of thought. They were like, I think people are just because before the internet really got going, guys. Like trying to sort of find new songs and discover new bands, especially that like weren't from your country and weren't getting radio play and all this, it was quite difficult. So you would just hear like the odd song. I remember like I got a lot of my music taste is based on stuff that was played in like Buffy and Angel. Like I would hear a song and think,
MySpace.
Oh, that's sick. Who did that? Yeah. So I don't know. So I can't remember how I got into the Goo Goo Dolls, but then I did. And then I must have just seen while scrolling through LimeWire, wherever the fuck, might have been Morpheus, might have been Kazaa, you know, all the old school ones. I must have just seen, oh, there's another Goo Goo Dolls song, so I'll download it. But yeah, one of the other things I read was that because they do sound quite similar, so John Rzeznik, like I didn't even notice. But yeah, that just blew my mind, Josh, when I read that, when I paused it and it said, oh, this song's by this person.
LimeWire for the kids at home was giving the family computer every virus in the world because you really wanted the new Arctic Monkeys single. Anyway.
Or the new Goo Goo Dolls song.
All the new Goo Goo Dolls, which was not them.
Anyway.
So,
I'll
Jennifer
take a little
Coolidge.
breather.
Yeah.
I'll take a little breather there. So you tell me, was there anything, could you identify anything that you liked about this film? What was your overall impression?
Do you think that I liked this?
No. I reckon you liked Jennifer Coolidge. Do
you think I like this more or less than you like Rocky Balboa?
I reckon we're probably the same. I reckon we're probably on an even keel there. I reckon we're matching. So
I like this considerably more than you like Rocky Balboa.
Did you? Yeah.
Yes, I did.
Ace?
Yes, I did. Now,
what was it? Was it the outfits? Was it,
that's it.
High school?
I love flip phones attached to belts. That's it. It got me right in my kink, this film.
Yeah.
I love flip phones.
LOL.
I love texting with numbers and having to wait ages if you type an S and then a P.
Chat rooms.
Yeah, I love it. I love chat rooms. I love forums. No. So I think there's a lot to like in this film. It is flawed, and we'll get onto that, but there's a lot to like in it. So first off, the cast are pretty good. I think the cast are pretty good. This, we've touched on Jennifer Coolidge, Hilary Duff. She's a teen idol, man. She's an absolute teen idol. She's got some real star qualities to this. I think, and we've touched on this with Just My Luck, there is a tendency with this sort of film to be quite snobbish about it, because I don't know if it is, but it's got like that Disney Channel feel to it and that sort of thing, right? And like I said at the beginning, that doesn't mean it's not a good film, and that doesn't mean it's not an audience, right? And if you look at the target audience for this, it's probably predominantly, unless, correct me if I'm wrong, teenage girls, right? Teenage girls are often told that everything they like is shit. And I will not have it. Like, it's one of my things. I'm like, no, everyone likes what they like. And I know lots and lots of teenage girls are like, oh, you like this band? Shit. Whereas teenage lads are brought up to be like, football and that. Yeah, do you know what I mean?
Everything's cool.
Yeah, so that's one of the things. So I went into this like, right, I'm going to go into this with as balanced a view as possible. I was, when I said the whole, fuck you, Alice, I was only joking.
Yeah.
It was just, it's just one of those things. So anyway, the cast are pretty good in this. Hilary Duff very much carries this. She brings a real star quality to her character. She brings a real emotional heft. Like, she's not a bad actor. She's at no point I'm like, she's not very good. Do you know what I mean? She can sing, she can act. She's great in this. She very much carries it. And she's so young. So one of the things, I was going to put this in my dislikes, but I'll ask you now, how old is Hilary Duff now?
Now, I assumed like my age, so like 33.
Oh, really? Actually, I thought she was about 45.
Oh, really?
And that's not based on what she looks like or anything like that. I just was like, well, she must be. She's fucking 35.
Yeah, I thought she was like, about my age and that.
30, she's only 3 years older than me.
Yeah, because I remember Lizzie McGuire and that, and thinking she's like always feeling like, oh, she is actually a high school girl, not like these, getting in 28-year-olds to play 16-year-olds.
The Spider-Man deal.
Like it just kind of always felt authentic with her. Like I just always felt like, oh, she is actually that age and she is actually that thing. Yeah.
So the cast are really good. Chad Michael Murray's quite good in it. I've not seen him anything before, but they've got good chemistry together. I do think the scenes that they're in. Stifler's mom, obviously, we've already said is good. The guy who's a friend at school, who's also the guy who's Emma Stone's friend at school in Easy A, is really good.
Yes.
I want to say as well, this is quite an early performance for Regina King, or one that I've seen anyway. I've only ever seen her this early in her career in this and Jerry Maguire. She's brilliant in this. If you don't know, she's the manager of the diner. She's brilliant in this. I think she brings the real emotional heart of the film. It's funnier than I thought it was going to be. It's not massively funny. It's not laugh out loud all the way through, but I think there's some funny bits in it, some funny characterization and that sort of stuff. And quite heartwarming as well in bits. It is quite feel good in places. I enjoyed some of the characterizations because they sort of went a little bit against the type in terms of your average rom-com and that sort of thing. So, for example, Austin, there's a sort of little bit of a subplot in it that Austin, Chad Michael Murray's character, is really uncomfortable in his skin. Like, he doesn't want to be the jock and the footballer and the this and the that. And I think that, they don't go into it that much, but I think the bits they do enough to be like, oh, he's not just he's just not a meathead or whatever. So, yeah, look, it's cheesy, it's formulaic, but mostly in a good way, I would say.
Interesting what you said there about Regina King as well, because I was watching the whole thing thinking, I'm sure I recognise her, but couldn't quite put my finger on what. And then when you said then, so I thought, oh, I'll just look it up. But she was like one of the main characters in Watchmen, the TV show, which I really, really liked.
She was,
I was like, oh, yeah, and she was brilliant in that. Just a couple more things. So you touched on there about Hilary Duff. And the thing that I sort of took away from her is that she's quite good at narrating. So we've done some films on this podcast where like quite sort of big, successful, experienced actors have tried to do narration and it feels really forced and really scripted and just not very natural. But she actually does it really well. And I think, because if I remember rightly, so in Lizzie McGuire, like she does break the fourth wall a lot and like that's part of it. I think, oh, did you not watch it?
Never seen Lizzie McGuire, no.
So I think she breaks the fourth wall a lot and then acts as a bit of a narrator in that. So obviously she would have had the experience from that. And just finally as well, so just before we kind of get we'll talk about this more in the dislikes, I'm sure, but there are elements of this film that are almost so lame that it's entertaining. Like you shouldn't be watching and you shouldn't be enjoying yourself. But I just did, because it's almost absurd in some places, kind of how cheesy and how cringy it is. But it was enjoyable. Like it's so like fluffy and just kind of light, and it's the kind of film that you'd want. And I felt this way about Just My Luck as well. Like if you've had a shit time, or you've had a run of sort of films or TV shows that are kind of quite dark and quite heavy and really complex, sometimes it is just enjoyable and nice to put something like this on and sit back and just kind of let it wash over you.
Okay, then let's move on to talking about things that we would change about the film, or things that we perhaps didn't like about the film. Alice, did you not like anything about A Cinderella Story? Is there anything you'd change about A Cinderella Story? Alice, over to you.
Thank you, Josh. So there are a couple of things. So I said previously that I do think that some of the jokes fall flat and then others have aged really badly. So the ones I'm talking about mainly are the ones about teenage girls' eating habits and how thin they may or may not be. So one of Shelby's friends, so Shelby is Austin Ames's girlfriend. So Austin Ames is the, Hilary Duff's love interest. He's like the Prince Charming sort of thing, but he has a girlfriend called Shelby. And one of her friends says that she isn't hungry, so she isn't going to eat anything in the diner. And then one of the lads that they're with says, oh, laxatives don't count as a meal. And then they all kind of laugh at her. And then when Austin is trying to figure out if he's into Sam or not when they're at the Halloween dance and he doesn't know who she is, he asks her, oh, would you rather eat a Big Mac or a rice cake? And she says a Big Mac. And he's like, oh, great, I like a girl with a hearty appetite and all this. And it's like, yeah, you want a girl with a hearty appetite, but who is also thin and beautiful, right?
Is that something that I've never thought, listen, if we're going to go out, you gotta have a hearty appetite. Like, does he want to eat her? Like, why the fuck does he want to have a hearty appetite?
This is something that was really doing the rounds kind of late 90s, early 2000s, because I remember it coming up in Buffy a couple of times as well. But this idea of like, oh yeah, like a girl who just eats what she wants and all this. And it's like, right, okay, but most girls who eat what they want are going to get fat. And society is literally doing everything they can to tell girls that they should be a certain size, basically underweight, to be of any value, right? So for me, those jokes have aged really poorly, and I don't think they would get made today. I think we're definitely a lot more sensitive around eating disorders and around what the things that you say and the way that sort of women are portrayed in the media can have such a profound impact on young women. Because the whole thing with the laxative thing, like one of the symptoms of bulimia is taking laxatives unnecessary. Yeah. And so it's just like, are you making a joke about a girl who's bulimic or who might be bulimic sort of thing? I was just like, that's just a bit shitty, and I wasn't into it.
Yeah, it's a little bit tone deaf, and like you say, you wouldn't get away. The only way you put it in a film now is if it was purposely drawing attention to the issue in an adverse way. Do you know what I mean? If you were going, this character, what a prick this character is because of whatever. But yeah, absolutely, yeah, that has not aged well.
No, I didn't think so. But I think the saving grace is that I don't think I see that sort of rhetoric much anymore, and I don't think that would end up in a mainstream sort of film or TV show. So it's, we like to see the progress that we're making and how attitudes change and how we're all being a bit more careful about the pressures and, the societal expectations of young people, especially young women. So Austin is fucking creepy, right? And a bit of a dickhead, okay? So the way he speaks to Sam in the chat room is so inappropriate given that he has a girlfriend, right? So when you look at the text that they're sending each other in the chat room, you hear their voiceovers doing it. And he's like, when can we meet? I've been thinking about you all day and all this. But the film lets him get away with it because Shelby is presented to us as this really horrible two-dimensional person, which then brings me on to another point, which is that I don't like how hollow and underdeveloped so many of the characters are. So one of the great things, and we've already touched on it, and I know we would because of the actor, but one of the great things about Easy A is that you get a bit about everybody's backstory, right? Even the antagonists. So you understand why they are the way they are, and you get to feel some empathy towards them. But in this, it's just kind of like, oh, the evil stepsisters are mean and Austin's girlfriend and her friends are bitches and all this. And then that's just the end of it. So I could have done with more characters being more developed and the script just being a bit less cheesy overall, because like I said, sometimes it's like so cheesy and so cringy that it kind of almost physically hurts you. Like some of the lines, it's especially between Sam and Austin. Like some of it is just like, oh, like when they're sending the texts and stuff.
It's the other side of that coin, isn't it? It very much knows what it is, this film, right? And so you know what you're going into and expecting. And so there's a certain amount you'll give it, but there are times when the balance is slightly off and it does stray into, oh, you've lost me. Like, or you know, or I'm not, that's too cheesy, that's too Hallmark cardy sort of thing. So yeah, I can get on board with what you're saying there, absolutely.
And then just finally, there is way too many dead fish in this film for me. So obviously one of the running narratives, oh fucking hell, mate, I'd forgotten how bad it was. So obviously one of the running jokes is that Fiona, so the stepmom, loves eating salmon from Norwegia. And so like she puts it in the diner in everything, like salmon omelette, salmon toasties, whatever it might be. So there's just fucking salmon everywhere, man. And like the cook's like picking them up and like jiggling them in front of the people. There's one where she goes in her fridge and it's just like the skeleton of the salmon, but it's still got the head on.
Yeah, for people listening at home, for new listeners, that's not a metaphor. And especially if you're one of our friends from across the pond in the States, that's not like a British thing. Like there's a phrase there's way too many dead fish. What Alice means is there are actually too many dead fish in this film.
So I have a phobia of fish. Very strange. I have an obsession with whales and sharks, but I have a phobia of fish. Don't ask me. I can't explain it. So when there's films, I think we brought it up when we did, was it Batman Returns with Rosie Holt? And obviously the penguin had like a fish in his mouth for about 8 or 9 minutes. And I was like, this is gross and I hate it. And just again in this, and it's just, if for anyone who's got a phobia, you know, but like the impact that it can have is so profound. And, you know, it's just, I need a trigger warning. Josh, I need a warning at the beginning. This film contains dead fish. Please look away.
It's just a good job that neither of us have a phobia of early naughty soft rock, because
no, give me all the early naughty soft rock.
You go off your head with this.
Can you imagine? But that was it for me. Some quite broad points in there. I think about some of the humour and some of the script. Overall, it was kind of what I expected, and I do still think that it is a bit of fun. What about you, Josh? How long is this list for you?
So I mean, look, you know, you could pick apart this as much as you want until eventually all you're left with is a dead fish carcass. But right, I suppose there's one main issue with this for me, which I'm going to break down into two issues, but it's the overall, it's the adaptation element and the script, right? So the first one I'm going to make is the use of the Cinderella story as a framework, right? Which is, it doesn't need to be an adaptation of Cinderella. It's not anything like really the story of Cinderella, apart from the few key beats that everybody knows. So the loss of the parents, the leaving behind of the glass slipper, etc., etc. So I don't really get why they've bothered to do it. It doesn't really add much to the story, but you could still have the story of the sort of pen pal type relationship without it being an adaptation of Cinderella. It really doesn't add anything to the story. And then on the other side of it, they can't make up their mind on what to do with it. So they could have lent into it more and given us more. So there is no obvious fairy godmother, for example. I think it's meant to be Regina King's character.
Rhonda, because she gives her the dress.
Who gives her the dress and helps her out and looks after her. But really, it doesn't really lean into it that much. And there's no sort of element of like, I don't know, an adaptation of a pumpkin and getting to the, you know what I mean, getting to the ball and all that. It didn't need it. Either they needed to commit to it and lean more into it. I'd be like, this is an adaptation of Cinderella for the 2004 market. So this is this and this is this. Or didn't need to be. And I think they needed to pick one a little bit like we said with Just My Luck, in that it didn't pick its audience. Well, this didn't pick its decision on its adaptation. Is it, or is it not an adaptation of Cinderella? If it is, give me a little bit more. Give me a little bit more, you know, and I can see how it is. Otherwise, they've just slapped the word Cinderella on the title, and really, if you didn't call it a Cinderella story, I'm not sure many people would go, oh, it's a Cinderella. Like, it's just sort of a rom-com.
I think for me, it's the step mum and the sort of evil stepsisters. They're kind of like the main, the the thing from the Cinderella story
Yeah.
that's sort of connected to it. So I wonder, I don't completely agree with you there, and I do think that Rhonda does sort of fill that fairy godmother role a bit because, you know, she looks after her while she's at work and, you know, she's there scrubbing the floors and stuff, and then she eventually moves in with her and I guess she adopts her and stuff. So I don't totally agree with you there, but I do see what you mean. And I do think more could have been done. If you want it to be a fairy tale, give me a little bit more of that.
Make
Otherwise,
it
why have you
more like
called
make it
this?
more like a fairy tale. So, and then the other side of it is just the script in general. So, like we've already touched on, it is cliched, it is predictable, it is formulaic, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But there are some elements where it's a little bit full of holes. So, I think they needed to build up a few things more. For example, I don't believe she won't be popular. There's not enough in this film that makes her be like, you wouldn't be popular. She seems to be unpopular in the film because she works at a diner, right? Well, it never says that it's a school full of rich people who don't need to work, or it's a fee-paying school or anything like that. So everyone works part-time jobs in schools. There are loads of teen dramas and comedies like this where everyone works in a restaurant, a bar, a shop, a video shop, a bowling alley, loads of stuff. So I don't really believe, A, that she'd be unpopular in general, and B, that she'd be unpopular because she works in a diner.
Yeah, it's like, hey, diner girl. It's like, that's not the insult that you think it is.
It's a nothing. It's a nothing thing, is it? It's a nothing. I don't think they build up enough why she wouldn't want to be with Austin, because they lean into that thing of he's actually a sort of soft-centered soul sort of thing, and he's nice. So it doesn't really explain why she wouldn't want to be with him when she knows it's not him, apart from that he's popular, and I guess that he's got a girlfriend as well. So I do get that bit. The pacing is a little off as well. I think that after she leaves the party, about the hour mark, it takes a little bit of a dip. It feels like it sort of runs out of steam and ideas a bit. Then after 15 minutes or so, it picks up for that last conclusion, and that's okay, that's good. But I do think it sort of runs out of ideas, and I think that's where the adaptation side comes into it, because they could have done more with it. Do you know what I mean? They could have, or he put some flyers up, but I reckon they could have done. I just think they could have done more with the adaptation, or just more with the story in general at that point. Again, there's a couple of flaws as well with some character motivation. So some fucking exceptionally bad dadding by the dad.
Yeah,
I mean,
oh my God,
first of all, so he dies in an earthquake, but he dies because he leaves her and goes, and someone shouts for help and he goes to help. Nah, mate, it's like getting an oxygen mask on a plane. Stay in the doorway and watch the kid that you're with, because you're no use to anyone if you're moving to help someone else and then you're killed, which is what happens. And then second of all, he hides the will in a book for her to maybe find one day, having made her undergo.
Thanks, Dad.
So it never explains, right? So obviously the sort of, it hints at that he must have known that the woman he married was a nightmare, so she'd try and steal money and make his daughter Sam's life hell, so he hides the will in a book for her to get. But in order to get that, she has to go through 15 years of essentially abuse. Nice one, Dad.
Thanks, Dad.
Cheers, Dad.
Even in death, you're doing dirty.
So some proper shit dadding in there.
Yeah.
Also, the stepmom's plan doesn't make any sense. So the whole point is that so she works Sam to the bone. She makes her work in the diner. She makes her do all these chores around the house, right? Like Cinderella does. Except that the reason Sam puts up with it is because she says that she needs to rely on her stepmom for the money to go to Princeton University, where she wants to go. So what the stepmom then does is forge a letter from Princeton saying you didn't get in, which would mean she wouldn't have any need for her anymore. So if anything, she wants her to get into Princeton, so she's still reliant on her for money. So then she can still make her do stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, that's a bit of a, like, really, it's, oh, you got in, congratulations. I suppose you'll need some money then. Do you know what I mean?
And then if you don't get in, it's kind of like, oh, well, there's no point me staying here.
Yeah, I'll just go and get a job.
I might as well go and get a different job.
Yeah, I'll go and get a job and get out from this fucking horrible house.
Yeah, you're right.
So that popped into my head. But so there are a couple of holes in there. There's a couple of weird character motivations. There's a couple of conveniences. Could lean more into the adaptation side of things, but I'll sort of forgive it because that is what it is. There are plenty of films like this that have holes, as we said with Just My Luck, and I'm sure we'll say again with other films of this type. It knows what it is, and you know what? It's all right. I won't be in a rush to watch it again. It was no, it was nowhere near as bad. It was nowhere near as bad as I thought it was going to be. And I'm going to be honest, I can already tell, judging by what you're going to say about the critical reception, I think I know where this one is going. But let's move on. Okay, let's move on to talking about the critical reception then. So I haven't seen this. How do I think it did, Alice? Well, you've already hinted it didn't do well, so I reckon it's probably like right down there. I reckon it's right down there in the 4s or something like that.
All right.
What would I give it? It's a solid 6.
Do you think a 6?
So between a 5 and a 6, because this is definitely for a target audience. Would that target audience enjoy it? Well, I remember the target audience at school really enjoying it, so maybe so.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, so maybe so. Wasn't particularly for me, wasn't made for me, but I didn't have a horrible time watching it. Do you know what I mean?
That's good, isn't it?
So I could see what I liked and I could see the flaws. So hit me with it. How did it do?
Here we go. Okie dokie. So over on IMDb at the time of recording, it gets 5.9. And then over on Rotten Tomatoes, the audience give it 53%. And then the critics give it 12%, which is
wow.
That's the reason that it had to go on my list. I think if the critics had given it similar to the audience or the IMDb, like if it had been in the 5s, I probably wouldn't have even put it on my list to sort of explore as an underrated. But obviously, a 12% is very, very low. 12% indicates a bad film, a badly made film,
that's
and
bad.
something that maybe just couldn't be enjoyed by anyone,
That's
sort of thing.
bad.
Obviously, a lot of the critics writing aren't going to be teenage girls, so they're not the target audience. And I do. Like you said, you can see the flaws in it and you can see where the issues are, but I don't think it is 12% bad. I think the audience score and the IMDb score are probably fair.
Yeah, I'd
I
say
think that
so.
12 just drags it.
So that drags it down to just about 4 out of 10, just over.
Okay.
I think that's pretty harsh. I mean, look, it's it knows what it is. It's not perfect. It's not up there with Easy A and Mean Girls. It's not, if you're talking about the same thing, but it's not offensively shit, and it's not 12% bad. But like you say, that comes back to the point we made earlier around snobbery, around this sort of product. There is an audience for this. Get over yourselves and try and put you in the shoes of that audience. Do you know what I mean? In the same way that if you went and watched fucking Fireman Sam the movie, you wouldn't be like, do you know what I mean? It's everything's got a target audience. You got to try and look at it through the eyes of the intended, really.
Exactly.
I appreciate that everything, in an ideal world, everything should entertain everyone. It doesn't, so get over it. So what are we saying? Underrated?
I think I am going to stick with my original hunch that this was perhaps underrated indeed. What about you?
I'd say so. Underrated, yeah.
Yay! Well, there we go. A little bit surprised that Josh is on board with me on this, but A Cinderella Story is
Alice,
underrated.
I'm not going to stab you in the back like you do with me with Rocky, but that's fine. I'm a better person than you.
Well, listen, I'm not denying that, Josh. I am not denying that. I am a piece of shit, and we all know. Right. Anyway, my favourite time of the week now. Josh, what are we going to be watching for next week?
Next week, we're going to be watching and talking about a film called Scenes of a Sexual Nature.
Ooh,
that is a film title.
Saucy.
That is a film title, not a porn.
And, you sure? I'm not going to find some weird shit when I start looking this up.
You'll definitely find some weird shit when you start looking it up. But we're going to be watching and talking about scenes of a sexual nature. Until then, if you'd like to get in touch with us, the email address is filmsandthatpod@gmail.com. We're on all the social medias. We're on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, other ones, just for Just Films and That Pod. And if you get a second, you give us a little review and a rating over wherever you get your podcasts. Oh, we'd appreciate it, wouldn't we, Alice? Oh, we would.
We would.
We would.
We'd love
Oh,
it.
we'd love a bit of that. And we're also on the television, aren't we, Alice?
We are indeed. Every Friday from 6 p.m, we are on the local TV network. So if you live in Birmingham, Bristol, Leeds or Liverpool or the northeast of England, you can find us on Channel 7 on Freeview. Or if you live in North Wales or South Wales, you can find us on Channel 8 on Freeview. Or if you have Sky and you live anywhere in the country, you can find us on Channel 188. That is every Friday on the local TV network from 6 p.m.
Thank you very much for joining us as ever. We'll see you next week. Goodbye from me. Cheerio.
Bye.